Okay, in this video, we're continuing our discussion of ARC Section 80, and that's for the compilation of financial statements. And the last several videos have been about the accountant's compilation report and how we should modify it for different circumstances. And in the last video, we discussed how to modify the accountant's compilation report when there's supplementary information that was voluntarily included by management with the financial statements. And this video will discuss how to modify the accountant's compilation report when the supplementary information included with the financial statements is required. So first, let's go to the definition of required supplementary information so we have a good understanding of what that means, and then we can go through all of the additional modifications we need to make to the accountant's compilation report when that's included with the financial statements. Okay, so here's our definition of required supplementary information. It says that this is information that, as that designated accounting standard setter, requires to accompany an entity's basic financial statements. So for instance, if in GAAP they require the supplementary information to be included, then it's a required supplementary information. So required supplementary information is not part of the basic financial statements. However, a designated accounting standard setter considers the information to be an essential part of financial reporting for placing the basic financial statements in an appropriate operational, economic, or historical context. And in addition, authoritative guidelines for the methods of measurement and presentation of the information have been established. And so now we understand this is a schedule outside of the financial statements that the financial reporting framework requires, or that the accounting standard setters require, to be included with the financial statements. We can go down to the section of how to modify our accountant's compilation report to reference this and explain how much responsibility we have on that supplementary information. Okay, so now we're back in the requirements and ARC section 80.37 through 39 as it relates to how we should modify our accountant's compilation report when there is required supplementary information included with the financial statement. And it says that we should include a separate paragraph in the accountant's compilation report on the financial statements when there is required supplementary information, and that other meta paragraph should include language to explain the following circumstances when they apply to us. So we need to make a paragraph similar to the last video we did on where we discussed the inclusion of supplementary information, and we should also modify that paragraph as these different situations occur. So for instance, we might include a statement that says the supplementary information is included and we performed compilation engagement on the supplementary information, and but if we didn't perform a compilation engagement on the supplementary information, then we would say that the supplementary information is included and that we did not perform a compilation review or audit on the required supplementary information. And if it turns out that the supplementary information was required by the financial reporting framework, but that management did not include that supplementary information with the financial statements, then we would have to make a statement that says the required supplementary information is omitted. And in some cases, it might turn out that management included some of the required supplementary information and omitted some of it. So we would need to make a statement that says that some information is missing and some is presented. There might be instances where we might need to say that management departed from the prescribed guidelines for the required supplementary information. So they might have included it, but it departed from what the requirements for it were. And so we would need to include that in our other matter paragraph. And finally, if in our procedures we were unable to determine whether the supplementary information was presented in accordance with the prescribed guidelines and the requirements, then we might need to state that we have unresolved doubts about whether the required supplementary information was presented the way that it was supposed to. So basically, we would take the paragraph in ARC section 34 or 80.34 that we discussed in the last video and modify it for whatever certain situation that we have with this particular engagement. And if it turns out that we did not perform a compilation engagement on the required supplementary information, but management did include some or all of that required information with the financial statements, then we should take the paragraph in ARC section 80.34 and include the following elements with it. So we should first say that that the financial reporting framework, for instance GAAP, requires that the particular required supplementary information be included with the financial statements. And also a statement that the information is not part of the basic financial statements, but it's nevertheless required by whoever the accounting standard setter is. So for instance, the FASB, who sets the GAAP standards, and that standard setter considers it to be an essential part of the financial reporting for placing the basic financial statements in an appropriate operational, economic, or historical context. We should also include a statement that we did not perform a compilation review or audit on the required supplementary information, and that we did not express an opinion or conclusion, nor provide any assurance on the information. And if it turns out that management did not include all of the required supplementary information, meaning that some of it was included, but some of it was omitted, we need to add these statements as well. And so this says that management has omitted whatever part of the required supplementary information was missing, and that the financial reporting framework that was being used, for instance GAAP, requires that missing piece to be included with the financial statements. And then we should also include a statement that the missing information is not part of the basic financial statements, However, it's required by the accounting standard setter, for instance, the FASB, and that they consider it essential to the financial statements for these reasons. And if it turns out that the measurement or presentation of the required supplementary information departs materially from the prescribed guidelines, then we need to include this paragraph to describe the departures. And if it turns out that we can't get comfortable enough about whether the required supplementary information complies with the requirements set by the standard setters, then we should make a statement to that effect in our accountant's compilation report and say that we have doubts about whether material modifications should be made to the required supplementary information to put it in accordance with the guidelines. And finally, if all of the required supplementary information is omitted, then our separate paragraph should include the following elements, and that is that management has omitted the required supplementary information and that it's required by the financial reporting framework. And then a statement that the accounting standards setters think that that required information is essential to the financial reporting for the users to understand the operational, economic, or historical context for the financial statements. So there's a lot here, but in general, you can make sort of a decision tree out of this. You start with ARC section 80.34 and the structure of that paragraph, and then you modify it to fit any of these particular circumstances that might be the case. We did the compilation engagement. We didn't do the compilation engagement. They omitted the supplementary information. Some of the supplementary information was missing. We identified departures, or we weren't able to get comfortable on whether supplementary information was in accordance with the prescribed guidelines. And if it turns out that we did not perform a compilation engagement on that required supplementary information, then we would include each of these requirements, or rather a statement. And finally, if the supplementary information was omitted, then we need to include these paragraphs. We've got a few explanatory material sections throughout here. We've got A46 and A45 and A44 to give us some more information on how to modify our accountant's compilation report for these circumstances. So let's go down to A44 through A46 to get that information. Okay, so here we're down in the explanatory material as it relates to including a paragraph about the required supplementary information in our accountant's compilation report. And here it gives us some examples of different required supplementary information that is typically included with financial statements and is required by accounting standard setters. So for common interest realty associations, they require estimates of current or future costs of major repairs and replacements of common property that will be required in the future, and that's required by GAAP. ASC 972 promulgated by the FASB. We see that this is required in ASC codification. Another example is the MD&A, the Management's Discussion Analysis, and Budgetary Comparison Statements required by the GASB Statement number 34. And so that would be a example of a required supplementary information, a schedule that might be included with the financial statements that we need to reference in our accountant's compilation report. And they define the prescribed guidelines here that we saw throughout the requirements above. And those are the authoritative guidelines established by the designated accounting standard setter for the methods of measurement and presentation of the required supplementary information. So if we went to ASC 972 and this subsection, or if we went to GASB Statement number 34, there would be some prescribed guidelines, possibly, to inform us of how we need to present this information, this supplementary information. And so it explains here that because the required supplementary information accompanies the basic financial statements, which we're performing a compilation engagement on, then the accountant's compilation report on the financial statements includes a discussion of the responsibility that we took on that information. However, if the required supplementary information is omitted by the entity, then we don't have a responsibility to present that information. We just make note in our accountant's compilation report that that information was omitted and include the other statements that we just discussed in the requirements section above.